Can you manage an entire business without actually talking to anybody in it? It sounds like a fantasy, right? Well, today I want to give you a behind the scenes look at how we use our executive dashboard. I'll show you how to build it, how to use it, and the key metrics I think you need to track. Plus, I'm including our asynchronous dashboard templates in the description down below, so make sure to check that out, open it up, and follow along as I show you how Time Doctor runs without us actually needing to talk to anybody, even though we actually like talking to each other quite a bit, but that's a completely separate video. Operating an 8-figure SaaS can get overwhelming pretty darn fast, but with the right tools, you can keep everything under control. Our executive dashboard is one of those tools. It helps us make decisions and, more importantly, empowers our team to be self-guided missiles and make decisions without using up valuable synchronous time. As the center of every asynchronous organization is a dashboard just like this, and as I outline in this particular book right here, Running Remote, which is a Wall Street Journal bestseller, by the way. Our executive dashboard is the document me and the rest of the executive team look at the most during our work days. So before we jump into it, there are some core tenets you need to understand that allows a document like this to actually be valuable. So tenet number one, everyone should have the same informational advantage as the CEO of the company. You need to reinforce thinking like an owner mindset. And this is something that, unfortunately, I would say in our interviewing, maybe only about 10 to 20% of interviewees have this type of mindset. Usually if they're an entrepreneur inside of bigger organizations or they've had some type of entrepreneurial history, they will have this type of mindset of thinking like an owner. But it's one of those situations where if there's a problem in the business, people actually get up and solve it, not because it is or it isn't their job. It's just that it needs to get done. And that type of mindset is absolutely critical if you want to be able to have people that self-manage themselves, i.e. thinking like an owner. Tenet number two is you need to automate as much as you possibly can inside of these dashboards. This allows for the data to be a third-party source of truth. So when you automate a number, the actual person that's reporting that number won't necessarily be biased in saying, oh yeah, the number wasn't necessarily as good or as bad as we wanted, or maybe instead of showing monthly active users, maybe we only show weekly active users or daily active users. These are all problems. When you have a third-party source of truth, when you automate these basically processes and the way that this information is communicated, then it gets a lot easier to be able to actually identify the truth inside of an organization. Number three, you need to get as much granularity as possible. The more measurements, the more freedom you have. And I know that that sounds very counterintuitive, that the more you measure, the more freedom you have, but the ability to actually be able to say to yourself, hey, here are the metrics, and then you need to be able to do, or you can do whatever you want outside of that in order to actually execute on moving that particular number, frees you to actually focus on what's important, which is moving the number, as opposed to reporting on that particular number and identifying whether or not what you're doing is actually moving the needle in the right direction. Which brings me to my fourth tenet, which is every metric has a person attached to it. And if the person attached to the metric can't move it, then it's not worth actually measuring. This is a big one. A lot of people will just hand someone a metric and say, hey, go get us more traffic. But are they actually truly empowered to be able to do that? You have to identify that. Do they have everything in front of them in order to be able to move that number? Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they actually have to share a number with somebody else, which is something that happens in a small amount of cases. But as much as humanly possible, you have to sit down with those people and say, how can I make sure that you have all the power and tools you need to be able to move that number? Because later on, I'm going to make you accountable for it. Next one, tenet number five, is you need to remove vanity metrics. Well-reported and defined metrics makes finger pointing senseless and redundant. You can't talk your way out of bad metrics. And this is something that is incredibly powerful, particularly when you're getting to the end of the quarter and maybe a number isn't really on target. Again, inside of our organization, we have three major colors: green, yellow, red. Green, you're on target. Yellow means you're not currently on target, what we think you will hit target. And then red means without serious intervention, you're not going to hit your target. So you need to be able to make sure that those metrics are super clear and that they're empowered to be able to move them so that we can make as early a course adjustment as humanly possible on some of those metrics. Which brings me to tenet 6. I have this concept called the nesting doll concept inside executive dashboards. So the executive dashboard is the top one, and then inside of that, as an example, we have a metric called PQ PQLs, which is product qualified lead, and that would relate to the sales dashboard. So that's actually linkable inside of the actual executive dashboard. So I can go in and I can actually see what's happening inside of the sales organization and what metrics they're following. And then if I wanted to go to the marketing dashboard, or I wanted to go to even further down or down deep into the SEO dashboard, I could actually click, and go layer by layer to actually identify what the problem is. Tenet number 7 is don't measure activity. Every metric should track an outcome. And this is a hard one for people to really get their heads around. So measuring an activity versus measuring an outcome is sometimes very difficult for a lot of people to get their heads around. And let me give you an example of that. Activity might be, we are going to ship 3 separate new features inside of Time Doctor over the next 90 days. That's activity. The outcome is we are going to ship 3 features that are going to increase revenue by 10%. The second part of it is the critical part, because if you just have people throw stuff over the fence, it's not actually going to produce a result, an outcome, and it's important that you build your metrics that connect clearly to a very quantifiable outcome. Now, if you want more details on those tenets, they're actually in chapter 4 of the Running Remote book. It's available on Amazon and everywhere else that books are theoretically sold, just to let you guys know. And they're also linked down below in the description. But let's get into the step-by-step process of creating your dashboard. Step number 1 is, what kind of business are you actually running? So SaaS, as an example, which is what Time Doctor does, may be very different from an e-commerce website. What we measure inside of our SaaS business, as an example, is very, very different from other types of businesses. I'm going to take you through how we measure things in our SaaS business, and you can pull some ideas out of that, obviously. But if you're running an e-commerce website, as an example, the metrics are going to be significantly different. So number 1, we have 2 different categories. We have leading indicators and lagging indicators. So for leading indicators, meaning what we're going to do today that will hopefully produce a result in the lagging indicators, is number 1, PQL rate, which is product qualified lead rate. So how many product qualified leads are we getting inside of the organization? And a product qualified lead is basically someone that is interested in buying Time Doctor and qualifies that they have enough employees that it would make it interesting enough for us to be able to pursue that particular lead and close that deal. Nested underneath that is market qualified leads. And those are leads that look like they're actually could turn into a product qualified lead. So a market qualified lead is like all of the people that sign up for Time Doctor, and then product qualified leads are the people that we know would like to buy, let's say in the next 60 days, and have more than 26 employees inside of the organization. It just allows us to be able to identify the self-serve customers, meaning the customers that actually just get closed by the software itself, as opposed to the customers that our sales team would pursue because it's quantifiably advantageous for us to be able to put a salesperson on it and close that particular deal. Next is deals. So deals created, and that's as simple as it would sound. How many deals are we creating per month, as an example? And a deal for us must have 25 plus employees in order for it to be a deal. If it has under 25 employees, we do not count it as a deal. Again, our self-service funnel, our product-led growth funnel actually solves that. Inside of our organization, we actually don't like the term product-led and sales-led. We have assisted and unassisted, because when you go into a store, maybe you are a 5,000 seat organization, which should absolutely talk to a salesperson. However, we might come up to you and say, "Oh, sir, would you like some help?" And you'll say, "Oh, no, I'm just looking. Thank you very much." And you might actually walk out of the store buying 5,000 seats worth of Time Doctor. Totally cool. But we want to be able to identify what level of assistance you need. So going assisted, unassisted is much easier than going the PLG versus sales-led route. Next is pipeline, new business pipeline. So how much revenue are we going to close in the next 60 days? And we want to be able to make sure that we can actually clearly identify that number over a 60-day period, so that we can see, okay, we think that we're going to close $200,000 worth of monthly recurring revenue in the next 60 days. So we need to be able to prepare for that. And we also measure that very clearly to be able to identify, if we had $280,000 worth of pipeline, how much did we actually close 60 days later? Sometimes it's not the same number, which is a problem. Next is CS, which is customer success. And inside of that, we have business reviews. So how many of our big customers Are we actually sitting down with, talking to on Zoom or in person and saying, hey, how's your business doing? Here's the metrics that we see inside of your organization. Here are some things that we think that would be helpful inside of your company to be able to make you more productive as an organization. And that's something that we do quite a bit. And I think the target basically last quarter was like over 100 business reviews for our small team, and we knocked it out of the park. I think we had like 107 last quarter, which was great. Next is engineering, and engineering has one critical metric, which they actually have a couple, but the one that's super critical is product strategic releases. So how many strategic releases do we put up? And a strategic release isn't like we changed the look of a button or we added a little checkmark box to a UI. It's actually releasing something that creates more value inside of the business. And the way that we measure that is we identify with customers, did you like this feature? If this feature went away, would you stop using our product? There's various ways of being able to measure this, but is it actually strategic? Is it something that's going to create more value for all of our customers moving forward? Next is engineering, and we focus on sprint completion rate. So how often do we actually do sprints? And sprints are basically just like 2 weeks amount of coding time that we use to be able to identify all of those strategic releases as an example. So how often do we set a sprint and how often do we actually complete that sprint? That's it. Now, lagging indicators. These are the ones that are the most fun and the ones that I watch all day long. Number one is new business revenue. Pretty simple, right? How much new business do we generate every single month inside of the business? That's it. Very simple. Next is net expansion revenue. And net expansion is also very simple. So we have new customers, and then we have people that buy more seats inside of Time Doctor. And we want to be able to make sure that that ratio is really healthy. We want to be able to make sure that customers down here that are brand new customers in 6 months expand their accounts. And expansion revenue is actually the most important metric inside of our organization because that's showing us where the vast majority of our revenue is coming from. Next is total new revenue. And so what that essentially allows you to measure is total new revenue plus expansion. That's total new revenue. So new customers plus customers that are adding more seats to Time Doctor, that is our total new revenue. Next one is our net churn rate. So how much churn do we actually have inside of the business? How many customers leave? How many customers are downgrading their account? And the next one we have is essentially net growth. And net growth is essentially our MRR divided by our churn. So we can identify how much revenue we are getting after all the dust settles, after we get new customers, after those customers expand, after customers contract, quit. How much actual revenue do we have at the end of the week, month, quarter, first half, second half, and year inside of the organization? And it's important for us to be able to make sure that we're measuring all of those things, obviously, but net MRR is by far the one that I look at the most because it is the one that is the most important. We actually recently had a couple customers that ended up quitting our product. And because of that, we ended up actually realizing that our sales team and marketing team were doing great work. They had hit their numbers perfectly. They actually blew through their numbers, but because we had an issue on the churn side, we actually ended up not hitting our net MRR number, which is really problematic, obviously, for the business. So once you've built all of these metrics and you've put together what they mean and why they're valuable inside of the organization, step number two is you need to figure out who owns those metrics. Sales, engineering, marketing, operations, human resources, can they actually move the number? So it's really important that they have everything in front of them to be able to move the number. And we usually sit down with those team leaders and say, can you actually move this number? Is there anything else that we need to get for you to be able to move that number? Because you have to speak now or forever hold your peace, because we're going to hold you accountable to that number in 90 days when the quarter is over. In some cases, there are shared metrics. They're possible, but at the end of the day, you need a single owner. So you usually need someone who's the primary owner of that particular metric, and maybe someone else needs to be part of that transaction in order for it to truly be owned by 1 or 2 people. It should never be owned by 3 people, by the way. That's just too much drama. But you need to be able to have that single owner in place in order for it to be successful. Example being expansion revenue at Time Doctor. For us, like, that is something that's held both by sales and by customer success. So they both have to work together in order to be able to make that happen. But as of right now, expansion is owned by sales, but it has a strong assist from customer success and support. Step number 3 is you have to identify targets. So yearly targets are usually set with our executive team and based off of your big, hairy, audacious goal, which we have in EOS, which is called Entrepreneur Operating System. Your big, hairy, audacious goal is identifying what you want to do in the next 3 to 5 years. And you identify that, and then that's the core piece that you build your yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly targets from. And that's really important for us to be able to identify. So usually that would be between co-founders of the company, me and Rob. That would be with the rest of the executive team, would be able to identify that BHAG and then pull that into, as I said, a yearly target, a quarterly target, monthly, weekly targets, that kind of a thing. Step number 4 is you need to create as many automations as possible inside of this entire system. So outside of the automations, you can manually track the rest, but in my opinion, having as many of these metrics automated as humanly possible, as I said before, allows for you to have that third-party source of truth. So are these metrics important? Yes, you should probably not have the person that is responsible for the number be the person that's publishing the number every single week, month, quarter, because sometimes they can move the needle in the wrong way, right? They can basically, I had one person actually, they confused daily active users with weekly active users. So they were giving me weekly active user numbers for a daily active user metric. And I don't know whether or not this person was confused or whether or not this person was just really not doing very well in their position and they wanted to be able to kind of make up for it. But I found out about that information and it was a horrible situation all around because we actually completely retrofitted the very next quarter of our business because that metric was wrong. So automate as much as you possibly can. And if you can't, obviously put it in manually, but double check that. Have someone else check those metrics from time to time, just because you need to be able to make sure that you can quantifiably trust in those numbers because you're going to be making a lot of business decisions off of them. Step number 5 is nest other dashboards inside of those dashboards. So you always need to be able to do a double click inside of anything. So our executive dashboard, as I said, is connected to all the other dashboards inside of the business. I can click on any of those links, go to that next dashboard. They would run their particular department, let's say the marketing dashboard as an example. And then I could click on the SEO dashboard and I could go into the SEO dashboard. And then I could double click on the content dashboard and identify what type of content is going through the queue. And I could get to the truth without actually talking to human beings. Even though we love talking to human beings, by the way, and you do need to do it from time to time, you want to be able to create a business where it's not required in order for you to be able to do those investigations. So creating those nesting dolls inside of the organization is absolutely critical towards the overall success of your organization. All right, now that you've got a sleek new async metric system in your business, work gets done, reports fly in, and course corrections happen in real time, all without you lifting a single finger. Well, not initially. Let's talk about some of the pitfalls we usually see after this kind of system is developed and how to stop them from happening inside of your business. First off, let's talk about the silo trap. This is a nightmare scenario where different parts of your business start operating in isolation because metrics aren't interrelated properly. Picture this, your marketing team is working on their own set of data while your sales team is buried in theirs. Without actually recognizing how these metrics connect, you're essentially doomed to face the dreaded silos. This isn't just a hiccup, it's a full-on blockade that can bring your whole operation to a screeching halt. It's important to be able to break down those silos inside of the organization. That's why we suggest doing quarterly retreats, yearly retreats. We usually do a company retreat once per year where we get everyone in the same room. We can usually solve for those problems. And then also doing a couple Zoom calls from time to time is absolutely critical in order to be able to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Next up is the unquantifiable types. These are those artistic souls in your team who swear you can't measure the magic of collaboration, creativity, or inspiration. And you know what? They're right to an extent. But that doesn't mean you throw up your hands and call it a day. You need to get smart about measuring the impact of these intangibles on your business. And there should always be something that you can measure. As I said before, no one should be in the company that doesn't have a number. And if they don't have a number to be able to measure, it's important to be able to make sure that you get them one and allow them to create some type of quantifiable return inside of the business. Next up, you need to be aware of the revisionist history rogues. This is fantastic writing, by the way, script-wise. These are folks that are honestly the worst. They'll agree to a metric, miss the target, and then claim it was never the right metric in the first place. They'll rewrite history to cover their tracks. To combat this, you need to create a culture where everyone commits to the metrics from the get-go and isn't afraid to speak up if they see issues. Finally, there's the pitfall of vanity metrics. These are the numbers that make your team feel good, but don't actually translate into real business value. Sure, it feels great to see high engagement on a social media post, but if it's not driving sales or growth, it's just fluff. What's the takeaway here? Building effective executive dashboards isn't just about having the right tools, it's about understanding the potential pitfalls and navigating around them. Don't let your business fall into the silo trap, get lost in unquantifiable measures, or be misled by vanity metrics. Download the template, follow the steps, and start executing scorecard-based leadership. If you found this video valuable, download the template, follow the steps, and start executing on an asynchronous dashboard. It is going to completely change your life, particularly if you're the person that's working 80 hours per week, talking to everybody, trying to figure out what's going on inside of the business. This is the thing that just creates calm. So you can just chill and relax and have a tea on a Friday afternoon like I am right now and look at dashboards all day long. Anyways, if you found this video valuable, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment below, and make sure to watch the other videos in this series, creating a scalable operating system for your business. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. If you've gotten to this point in the video, I think you should probably subscribe to this YouTube channel. It's free, unlike most other things in life, and it would bring me happiness and joy. Other than that, I'll see you in the next one.